Among all the HoYoverse games, Honkai Impact 3 has changed the most over the years. While newer games like Genshin and Honkai Star Rail play, look and feel very similarly to when they were released, Honkai Impact 3 was never afraid to take risks and shake things up. The game will feel very different if you come back from a 2 or 3 year break, and I don't mean this just because all your units got power crept. HoYo's modern titles follow a very steady formula that clearly works wonders for them. If it makes money, it doesn't need to change, am I right? But I often say that Honkai Impact 3 is a time capsule for HoYoverse. The more recent content is on par with any modern HoYo game, plus some junk here and there due to the old code, but to get there as a new player you have to play through some very clunky, outdated and ugly looking content by today's standards, made by a very small and passionate team that didn't have even a fraction of the manpower and budget they have today. I wanted to make this video to show people all the things that have changed between part 1 and part 2. It is no secret that after the end of part 1, many people left the game, and because of that there is a lot of misinformation online due to people thinking that things are the same as they were when they played the game 2 or 3 years ago. Part 2 brought many changes and the game feels a lot different. So if you ever find someone online saying things like "you have to pull for Stigmata in Honkai Impact 3, please link them this video and tell them that we're not in 2022 anymore, old man. Let's start with the most important thing for any gacha player, the gacha system. The gacha system received a lot of changes when the game transitioned from part 1 to part 2, and it became the best gacha system in any HoYoverse game, while being the worst prior to the transition. And before you crucify me for this hot take, this is just my opinion. Let's go over what changed. PT was lowered from 100 to 90 pulls like other HoYoverse games. And to fully max the constellations of a character and bring them to SSS, you need to pull only 6 copies instead of 8 like before. To offset that, you cannot get fragments from the gacha anymore, instead you get a new currency that allows you to buy fragments and some other stuff from a new shop. Also, most people know this, but I feel the need to mention it for the people who are new. Unlike other HoYoverse games, Honkai Impact 3 doesn't have a 50-50 system, you will always get the featured S rank on the banner. But we all know that the biggest issue with Honkai Impact 3's gacha system in part 1 was never the character supply banner anyway, but the gear banner, which got most of the changes. While this game doesn't have an artifact system, in order to fully gear a unit, you have to pull for their weapon and equip them with 3 pieces of gear tailor-made for them called Stigmata. Before part 2, the only way to get Stigmata for every new unit was to pull them on the gear banner together with the weapon, with each piece of gear having a PT of 50 pulls. This meant that in order to fully gear a unit in this game, you could go up to 200 pulls on top of pulling the unit itself. And unlike other HoYo games, characters in this game are very gear dependent. If you don't fully gear a unit, you might as well not pull for them at all because they are literally garbage without. Well, part 2 changed that and made all part 2 Stigmata farmable. Yes, you heard me right. You no longer have to pull for Stigmata, you can farm them directly. And the weapon has a 60 PT guaranteed now, and no 75-25 bull. Also, the chance of getting a Stigmata has been greatly increased, so you most likely won't even need to craft them because you will get all 3 pieces from the gacha before you get the weapon most of the time. While before you could go to 200 pulls to gear a unit, now you are done in 60. And this made gearing up units a lot easier. In order to craft and level up pieces of gear, a new material has been added to the game. You will hear most players refer to them as the cubes. The issue with the cubes was that in the early patches of part 2, they were very scarce and many people didn't have enough to fully gear units, but that was improved in later patches and now that isn't much of an issue anymore if you actively play the game. Still, the bad part is that in order to get them, you have to actually play the game, like every day, because some of them are locked behind weekly activities and events. So if you just come back to the game and you pull apart 2 units, there is a high chance that you won't have enough cubes to max their gear right away. At the same time, to offset the cheaper banner, HoYo introduced a dupe system for the weapons called synchronization, where you can increase the passive effects of your weapons. In order to fully max a weapon, you need to pull 2 more dupes, but the effects are not that big, and even whales don't bother going for most of them. Just 1 copy of a weapon is more than enough to have a fully functioning character, and the damage difference is minimal. As a low spender, during part 1 I often had to skip certain units, but ever since part 2 came out I managed to get every unit and fully geared them. That's why I said that part 2 has the best gacha system among all HoYo games, because I am not able to do the same in HSR or ZZZ even if I skip the weapon. I know that this might be a hot take, but I would rather pull for a unit plus weapon every time than risk losing a 50-50. But that's just me. When it comes to gameplay, the biggest difference between part 1 and part 2 is the addition of the Astral Ring system. This not only changed the way you build your teams, but also gave the characters a lot more flexibility, since everybody is now both a DPS and a support. But how does the Astral Ring work? Well, if you never played part 2, Astral Rings basically replaced ELFs and introduced a new type of unit in the game called Astral OP. Astral OP or Astral Operators are like ELFs but better. And unlike ELFs, you can play as them in the overworld and even put them on the bridge. They are semi-playable characters in a way, but they take a more passive role in the gameplay. They came with a new type of banner, and pulling for one costs the same as pulling for a regular unit, 280 crystals per pull, but the pity is 60 pulls instead of 90. Much like ELFs, they are not the highest priority, but in my opinion they influence the game a bit more. When you start part 2, you will automatically receive Dreamseeker for free, but the rest are gacha only, and while Dreamseeker is more than a decent substitute, and you can also use your previously owned ELFs as Astral Operators, some of them are more busted than the others. Like Overseer Teresa right here, who specializes in the Law of Ascension Astral Ring and basically allows you to use your enhanced QTE 2 times, which is huge. Much like an ultimate, the Astral Ring has a meter that you need to charge before using it. After your Astral Ring meter is full, the unit you use to activate it will have this special animation with your equipped Astral Operator and change your playstyle depending on the type of Astral Ring you have equipped. It's very similar with the Moon Ring from APHO2, where each type of ring centers around a different aspect of the gameplay. Right now we have 4 different AR specializations in the game, with a 5th one coming soon next patch. HoYo teased 12 different Astral Rings, so there's a lot to look forward to. Here are some examples. Wheel of Destiny, for example, turns your allies into shadows that you can summon on the field. This type of Astral Ring is very selfish, centered around keeping your main DPS on the field as much as possible. Then we have Law of Ascension, which is a QTE-focused Astral Ring. The playstyle of this ring involves switching your characters around as much as possible to trigger special enhanced QTEs. The new Astral Ring that will come next patch uses a shared team SP mechanic to deal great amount of damage. Besides an Astral Ring specialization, each unit comes equipped with multiple support tags. These tags determine which Astral Ring specialization a unit can support. Gone are the days of mono-elemental teams. Now, what matters is combining the right Astral Rings and support tags. Because of this, you will see many teams that are 3 different elements, or physical units in the same team as elemental units. It doesn't matter. Team building is much more flexible nowadays, since you don't need a specific unit anymore, but any 2 units with the right support tag for your main damage dealer. And if you don't have any, you can use a Rite of Oblivion unit, which is a universal Astral Ring specialization that offers general buffs regardless of what Astral Ring you have equipped. They are not as good as the units with the right support tag, but they are a decent enough replacement. This helped a lot with the power creep, which was one of the biggest issues with Honkai Impact 3 in the past. Since units can be both DPS and supports, and can support multiple astral rings, they stay a lot more in the meta nowadays. One analogy I like to use when I try explaining how power creep is a lot less of an issue is the egg basket analogy. Think of an egg basket with a finite amount of places for eggs. Well, during part 1, each time a new Valkyrie got released, it would replace an already existing egg that was in the meta egg basket. Well, the nice thing about the Astral Ring system is that since HoYo keeps making new Astral Rings and support tags, they essentially create new spaces for the newer units in the basket instead of having the eggs compete over already existing spots. And not only that, each egg now has a lot more spaces in the basket that they can fill, so even if the egg is kicked out from one spot, it still has plenty other spots left. A good example of this is part 2's oldest S-rank unit, Senadina. On release, Senna was very busted. She was both a great DPS and a top tier support. Well, with the release of newer units, she became quickly phased out as a DPS and her supporting capabilities were reduced to only supporting the Wheel of Destiny Astral Ring. But for that specific Astral Ring, she is the best support and most likely she will remain the best support forever, since HoYo will probably focus on newer Astral Rings. Sure, she's far less relevant than she was at release, but she's not obsolete. She still has a place in the meta. This doesn't mean that the power creep is non-existent, it's just much less of an issue. HoYo is still shielding the newer units in the Abyss and Memorial Arena and the leaderboards are still here. But things are a lot more relaxed when it comes to building and investing into part 2 units compared to part 1. One negative of the Astral Ring system is that if you are an older player who wants to come back to the game, part 1 units kinda fell off hard because they don't have Astral Rings. So if you return now, you might find yourself with nothing good to use until you build up your part 2 roster, which is a lot easier now. This is truly a shame, but depending on how you look at it, this culling of the part 1 units made part 2 a lot more friendlier. But I can also understand why people would find this upsetting and wouldn't want to return, because their part 1 units are more or less irrelevant now. Well, not all of them. You will still see some part 1 units like Mistaline, Hersher of Rebirth, Garuda Fuhua, Luna, and the Hersher trio used from time to time, but not enough to justify recommending pulling for them. But if you already have them, you can still use them. Also, some part 1 units like Finality Kiana and Hersher of Human Ego received new Divine Keys and Stigmata sets that allow them to use the Astral Ring. Some part 2 units even replaced some part 1 supports. Examples of this are Sparkle replacing Aichan for fire teams and Mini Durandal replacing Prometheus for physical teams. So if you are a returning player, you might want to focus on these units first, since you can use them in both part 1 and part 2 teams. You will also notice a big improvement in the quality of the models, gameplay and animations for the characters. This is especially noticeable in the part 2 units that have part 1 battlesuits as well. Captain Verse is over. But recently it seems like HoYoverse wants to create a new event timeline that focuses on the cast of part 1 and takes place between part 1.5 and part 2. So if you want to know what the main cast from part 1 was up to in that time period and get some wholesome slice of life moments with them, you will enjoy the part 2 events. And remember how before we had event battlesuits like Onming, Fallon Rosemary, Sirin, etc. that were all part of the Captain Verse? Well, now event battlesuits are mainly taken from the cast of part 1. Both the most recent Kiana and Li Sushang battlesuits are equivalent of what event battlesuits were in the past. But not all part 1 characters that received the part 2 battlesuits are from events. Teresa kinda is also event, also main story, but Mini Durandal is purely from the part 2 main story. Another good thing about events nowadays is that they are permanent. HoYo added a new tab called the Voyage Anecdotes that replaced the old Chronicles tab, and there you can go and find almost all the events that came out in part 2. And don't worry, the Chronicles are not gone from the game, they were moved to this tab right here in the Voyage Anecdotes. So now you don't have to worry that you'll miss out on events, stories anymore. And you can even play the Honkai Impact 3rd and Honkai Star Rail crossover event anytime you want. When it comes to daily and weekly activities, Honkai Impact 3rd was always regarded as a game with a lot of chores. Well, Part 2 introduced a new light system through the Schicksal vacation tickets that allow you to skip pretty much every tedious task in the game. You don't want to farm crafting materials? Don't worry, you can skip Universal Mirage now. Don't want to do open world tasks? Don't worry, you can skip that too. You had enough of annoying weekly quizzes? You can skip that too. Is Elysian Realm too tedious for you? Well, there's a light mode that lets you skip the first 8 levels. And these tickets are fairly easy to obtain from events and other activities. I skip every possible thing in the game and still have more than I know what to do with. And keep in mind that nobody is forcing you to use them, so if you want to do these activities, you still can. I know plenty of people who still do the APHO2 missions because they like the gameplay. Another big change is the fact that patches are longer. Ever since version 8.1, patches seem to be 9 weeks instead of the usual 6. 8.2, which is the current patch, is also 9 weeks, and from the expiration date of the Battle Pass shops, we can surmise that 8.3 will also be 9 weeks and 8.4 will be 8 weeks. Now, I don't want to say that patches will always be 8 to 9 weeks from now on, because nobody but HoYoverse can confirm this, but I can say for sure that Part 2 has a much more irregular patch cycle. Maybe this 9 weeks patch cycles is something temporary, or maybe this will be the norm from now on. Nobody knows. Some people are happy about it because they have more time to farm for newer units and more time to play other games, while others are mad because the lack of content. There are many theories and speculations as to why this happened, from budget cuts to the idea that maybe HoYo is cooking something big for the game, but the truth is that unless HoYo comes out and says something, nobody knows the truth. Oh, and in order to adjust to a longer patch cycle, the Battle Pass also changed in the current patch. For instance, no more seasonal orbs. From now on, we will have one single type of orb that we can use in the shop through all the patches going forward. They also added every Valkyrie, weapon and stigmata up to version 6.0 to the shop for people to buy, and said that the shop will be updated in the future. And also now there are more levels with rewards. Besides these, many other quality of life changes have been added to the game. You can upgrade weapon and stigmata directly to max level now. No more clicking simulator every time you want to upgrade the unit's gear. Now make one for the skills too, HoYo. Also, no more co-op. Co-op was replaced with a new mode that can be skipped with the light tickets. And another thing that many old players don't know is that we have proper mouse support now, so no more awkward keyboard controls if you play on PC and don't use a controller. But you have to go to the settings and enable the option from there first. The aspect with the most misinformation surrounding it is the story. One of the main reasons why people quit or took a break from the game after the end of Part 1 was because Kiana's story was over. And while that's true in a sense, her journey in the story is far from done. HoYo kinda self-sabotaged themselves by presenting Part 2 as a quote-unquote new story in the hopes of attracting new players to the game. But this only backfired on them because, well, it wasn't true. And it ended up alienating the old players and confusing the new ones because Part 2 is not a new story in the truest sense. It's a direct sequel to Part 1 and Part 1.5 that requires you to have knowledge of the prior story to understand it. After a certain point, most of Part 1's cast is back, which makes it even more weird for someone to play the story without playing through Part 1 first. And well, it's true that Part 2 introduces a lot of new characters and takes place in an entire new setting, the planet of Mars. The overall lore directly ties to Part 1. It's not a new story like many people believed, and the cast of Part 1 is not gone. But it's true that Kiana, Mei and Bronya are not the main focus like they used to be before. But as the new story progresses, progresses and we learn more about the new characters, it looks like they are shaping up to be worthy successors to the old main trio. I think that the new Hylia battlesuit is the most hyped up Part 2 battlesuit by the community thus far, and that speaks volumes about the quality of the story given that we just had a new Kiana recently. Another thing that many people say is that the story is boring, overly long and filled with a lot of jargon and exposition. And while that's true for some chapters in Part 1 and the first chapter of Part 2, HoYo really took the feedback to heart and improved the story in every possible aspect. The length of the chapters has been reduced to 3 to 4 hours at most ever since chapters 3x. The dialogue is also a lot easier to understand without unnecessary long exposition dumps. The presentation also improved a lot since Part 1. The camera angles are a lot more dynamic and give you a very cinematic feeling, and there are a lot more in-game cutscenes, and the overall quality of the story increased with every chapter. Another difference is that unlike most of Part 1, Part 2 takes place in an open world format, with the new open world being a lot more expansive, visually impressive and filled with puzzles and chests, unlike the Part 1 counterparts like Colosten, Elysium Everlasting and the Moon. I personally find the Part 2 exploration enjoyable, but some people don't really like it. The only chapter that is stage-based is Chapter 4, but keep in mind that you cannot replay the story anymore. But the major boss fights are all replayable. And another big negative is that while we got more in-game cutscenes and better presentation, we have not got a proper animated short ever since the end of Part 1. It's still unclear if we'll ever get one or if HSR took all of our budget. Graphics and world design also improved, and while some areas like Clunky still looks and feels clunky, others like Osha City and Rimu look on par with any modern HoYo title. To make a proper comparison, look at some areas from Part 1 and compare them to Part 2. Part 2 also has some of the best boss battles that the game has ever seen, and the story ties directly into Honkai Star Rail, but I won't say how and I'll let you play for yourself to find out. Overall, I find Part 2's story very compelling. Many people will say that it's confusing and directionless, but after you understand what HoYo wants to do with it, it becomes much clearer. Part 2 is all about uncovering the history of Mars. But the way HoYo chose to do this is in an unlinear manner, giving us different pieces of Mars's history that need to be put together by the player. They are not in chronological order. I understand that some might not like this type of storytelling. It's not for everyone, that's true, and I think it's fair to be off-put by it, but for me, Part 2's story is very enjoyable. Honkai Impact 3 is an old game that is trying to survive in a market that gets more and more oversaturated every year. While the old age shows a lot of games' faults, it's still very much a title worth experiencing even today. You can see that the devs are still very passionate about it and try to improve and shoot above their weight, even if it seems like HoYo as a company decided to not give them as much support anymore. Whether you decide to return or not, keep in mind that the game keeps changing and a lot of things are not the same as they were when you last played it.